While America was still celebrating its 6,000th birthday, the NFL was quietly burying one of its most beloved podcasts.
The Around the NFL podcast is fresh out of Zummy Drops.
Oh, no!
And NFL media keeps pushing buttons, pulling levers, and canning its best talent and its best shows. They've shown the door to Michael Irvin, James Palmer, and Andrew Siciliano, to name a few. They keep taking something that's not broken, and they keep trying to fix it, and fix it, and fixing it until you can't even recognize it, like Michael Jackson's face. And now, after more than a decade growing a devoted following and covering the NFL in an accessible and entertaining manner, the beloved Around the NFL podcast is no more. A show that football fans built a connection with in ways the NFL should dream of. A show that feels like the NFL had a million ways to make work for the foreseeable future and instead chose to end it for no apparent reason. The Around the NFL podcast, which was hosted by Dan Hanzus, Mark Sessler, Greg Rosenthal, and the late Chris Wessling, ran since 2013 and mysteriously went off the air in May. An abrupt stoppage for a show that ran consistently for so long. And finally on Sunday, the NFL announced the show had essentially been canceled. Not in so many words. Well, the NFL really didn't say much of anything, more so announced from NFL media, a new show was forming with Greg Rosenthal as he was being assigned to host that, while Dan Hanzus and Mark Sessler were leaving NFL media. Their immediate destination? Unknown. Rosenthal posted this on Twitter though. We started the Around the NFL podcast 11 years and over 1,600 episodes ago. We didn't take a single break in all the years since, which is part of what made the last 6 weeks so heartbreaking. I never expected our last show on May 23rd to be our last show, but here we are. To sum this up, succinctly, this fucking blows. Sucks. Not only was this one of the longest running and best football podcasts, but it was ended by NFL media in a truly unceremonious manner. It's not fair to the hosts, and it's not fair to the fans in the US and overseas who built this show into their schedule for such a long time. Like a lot of great American bands, they might have been even bigger in Europe than they were stateside. The NFL took one of their most beloved properties, drove it out to the Pine Barrens, and emptied their clip. None of us understand why.
This house looked like shit.
Why? Why would any company willingly remove its heart and soul? The thing that made people care about its product, the league, in one of the most genuine ways possible.
Money, money, green, green.
It's one thing to cancel a show that people genuinely love. It's another thing to not allow that show to provide a proper send-off to its fans. It's like the NFL media department tried to offend some of its most loyal customers and fans, the people who love football so much they consume extra hours of football podcasts about the game. Today I wanted to try and answer the question why this happened and discuss the perplexing and horrible decision that's been made with Around the NFL. Do you find it hard to sleep without your favorite podcast to listen to? Well, you won't with a Bear mattress. See what I did there, guys? Today's episode is sponsored by My Dreams and Bear Mattress, who is still offering a massive 4th of July discount. A mattress is a big purchase. So thank me personally and repeatedly when you go to bearmattress.com/that'sgood and use my code ThatsGood to get a higher discount than what is even being offered on site for their 4th of July sale. Now, I received my Bear mattress last summer, and the summertime is when I appreciate my mattress the most. I sleep hot, and the Elite Hybrid mattress that I have uses cooling technology and a 5-zone support coil system to pull heat away from my body, keeping me cool all night long. And I've traveled a couple times recently, and when I return home, I am thankful I have a fiberglass-free Bear mattress to sleep on. Do you know other mattresses use fiberglass? Now, we changed mattresses at my house last year to help my wife Jess's back issues. We love the mattress so much that we got one for our toddler and for Jess when she has to sleep in the same room with our lovely but sleepless child. So now Jess has an incredible mattress to sleep on when our daughter has a nightmare, and Jess has slept so much better since we made that change. So go to bearmattress.com/that'sgood to get 40% off plus $400 in sleep accessories dropped off right at your door. Take the easy online quiz to determine which mattress is best for your sleeping and body type, and rest assured knowing there's a 120-night sleep trial to test your mattress along with a lifetime guarantee. Plenty of time to see if Bear can help you sleep when your football team is giving you night terrors. Now, to give some background on the show, it started as a segment on the Dave Damashek football program, another thing the NFL whacked years ago, with Mark Sessler and Dan Hanzus, and evolved into its own show, adding Wessling and Rosenthal, and grew into a flagship show for NFL fans. Unlike a lot of football podcasts these days, it wasn't too X's and O's heavy. It was for legitimate friends, well-informed friends, breaking down football every week. They always knew what they were talking about, but I think the reason people latched onto it like a mother's teat, and why it became so successful like a mother's teat, was the chemistry the four hosts had, the in-jokes, the sound drops, and the fact that they didn't take football too seriously, like a mother's teat. Now, the show consistently performed well in terms of podcast downloads, usually living somewhere in or around the top 10 for football pods. It wasn't a juggernaut, but it was consistently good and consistently downloaded. I don't think all those other shows had that same community, though. They would regularly do shows overseas, in Europe, and packed venues, which is a crazy thing for an American football podcast. As the NFL pursues growth in Europe, this is another thing that just doesn't make sense about ending the show. Each of the hosts had their teams, and they weren't afraid to just be fans at times. And that's not unique in today's podcast and football media landscape, but for a show under the NFL umbrella, it was at the time. Dan's a Jets guy, Mark's a Browns fan, and they both resented the fact that Gray got to see his Patriots win 3 fucking Super Bowls during the show's run. It's a show that had legitimate dynamics. You felt like they all hung out, mostly because they did hang out. They were all groomsmen at Chris Wessling's wedding. And when Wessling passed away from cancer a day before the Super Bowl in 2021, it was devastating, not just for the hosts, but for so many of the fans too. They lost a friend. People listening felt like they lost a friend. And I don't think the NFL or ESPN, who are still in merger discussions, have any shows that touch that level of intimacy or community. I don't think they have any shows that come remotely close, to be honest. It feels like right now that whoever is pulling the strings has a massive disconnect with what the fans actually want in terms of programming. I don't think the fans want another godforsaken show where the hosts break down DVOA or PFF grades or pass rush win rate, or conversely where someone is yelling for 4 straight minutes about how angry a run may or may not be.
Can I get some mustard? Your mama's got mustard.
Not that there aren't audiences for those shows, and not that those formats aren't good. Around the NFL was just different, and a necessary option for so many listeners. It hit a nice middle ground we rarely see anymore in sports media. I think fans still yearn for a show that sounds like you're sitting at a bar, shooting the shit with a few friends who know ball, but also love football for its storylines, its rivalries, its trends, and idiosyncrasies. Not every show has to be either a talking spreadsheet or some guy telling you about his bets or who to start in fantasy football this week.
The listeners are starting to turn on us to varying degrees. There's some haters out there. But the good thing with podcasts is just like stop listening. So that part I don't. You do have that power.
Podcasts, at least the successful ones, develop a quasi-relationship with the audience, and that takes a lot of time and chemistry. 2 things around the NFL certainly had for the last 11 years. Something Good Morning Football has struggled to rekindle since Kay Adams and Nate Burleson left. That's another show that lost another core piece as Devin McCourty isn't making the move with the show to Los Angeles. Usually, you see a show have its legs cemented and dropped into Lake Mead because nobody is watching it, or if the show becomes too expensive to continue to produce. Neither of those things were true for around the NFL. The point is, it's a cheap show to produce, which should have ensured its safety as the network cuts as many corners as it can moving forward. Like I mentioned, Greg Rosenthal is sticking around at NFL Media and will be reassigned to another show, a new podcast by the name of NFL Daily, which I'm assuming will air weekly. Dan Hanzus and Mark Sessler are making their exit, and I hope their talents are realized in whatever else they end up doing, whether it's a new football podcast or not. My question is, why did they bring back Greg, but not everyone if Greg's doing another show anyway? They could have kept around the NFL as is and added 2 new episodes every week as an expansion of the show, or had Greg host the new daily show that they're eyeing as well. If I've learned anything from ESPN, it's that one man can't host too many shows.
What up, big boy? What up, baby? Hello, Christine.
Hello.
How to get to the NBA Finals is starting tomorrow night in Boston. It was a virtual no-show. Jaylen Brown, a virtual no-show, along with everybody else of the Stephen A. Smith show, eponymously named Stephen A. Smith.
Maybe they can. Now, I've never seen so many people in the football space on Twitter show so much overwhelming support for a podcast like I did on Sunday, and it was not just by fans of the show, but by their peers. I get absolutely no respect from my peers.
We've hit for the excrement cycle, everyone. All we have to do is talk about a little.
I just asked
We've been gone a month and we're already talking about pee and urine and fecal matter.
That's a tough thing to get. Give a ton of credit to the Around the NFL crew for building something so many people genuinely loved and respected. And I think Lindsay Rhodes, who also used to be with the NFL Network, said it best in terms of captivating the confusion everyone had. She tweeted, "The Around the NFL podcast overhaul is mind-boggling. Mind-boggling! To take a podcast with that kind of popularity that built the fan base before the space was way oversaturated and act like they can just build something different and the consistency doesn't matter is ... The ... there is actually really important. It signifies that nobody knows why. Nobody knows the thought behind this. And as I mentioned, the podcast inexplicably stopped putting out episodes in May. There was no explanation given in May, and for a show that built the name on consistency, fans have wondered what the hell was going on for months. Well, a month and a half, whatever. We're still wondering because Dan and Mark haven't been able to speak on the matter, and Greg had to break the news via Twitter. But when the show stopped posting, the NFL was also moving Good Morning Football from New York to LA. So there was this assumption that retooling was happening across the board, especially after the NFL Network fired a bunch of employees in early May, as well as killing NFL Total Access. The no news is good news sort of applied to Around the NFL until this last weekend. What I'd venture to guess is a combination of things occurred. The NFL wanted a bigger role for Greg Rosenthal. A safe guess, considering all the vacancies the network has made for itself. They wanted Greg, but weren't sold on investing in the thing he helped build, and they couldn't figure out how to make it all work, and instead of trying, they simply cut ties. This is intriguing because we know these guys are all friends, and I'm sure the conversations about all of this have been trying for Greg, Dan, and Mark. It's like a band breaking up, but without the fun sex and drugs to ruin it all. Just a silent corporate assassin. When one guy is keeping his job and the other two aren't, that's tough. That's really tough, and I feel for those guys. And I think we would have all preferred a clean break from the NFL for the show, where all 3 dudes left and continued their podcast independently, which they could have done, or taken it to another spot like The Ringer or Colin Cowherd's The Volume. We have to assume the NFL just wouldn't allow that to happen, that they probably own the show and weren't cool handing it over to the guys even though the guys built it, and maybe it wasn't feasible for the guys to make that leap on their own. I think at this point though, All we can hope for is the NFL to recognize the overwhelming response this announcement has generated and do the right thing by figuring out a way to bring the show back, to keep it alive for all the people who care about it. And I say that in a way that I genuinely want the NFL to see what everyone else sees in that show. For me, it's more of I'm not mad at the NFL media arm. I'm disappointed. Disappointed they didn't identify the value this show had for its company and its brand. Now, the good news is that while Johnny Barks and I were editing this episode, Dan tweeted, "Thanks to everyone who's reached out during this bizarre moment in time. We have a lot to catch up on, a lot. And I'm beyond excited about what we have coming up next. Hashtag heed the call. Incredible fire rises. You know in your heart." That's from Mark. So these two guys are cooking. They're going to be making something else. Excited to see what that's going to be. But at this moment, we still don't know. And while I'm sure whatever they're doing is going to be great, it's still sad knowing that the version of this show we all knew and all grew to love is done.
Heed the call.
Thanks for watching That's Good Sports. Please subscribe here on YouTube. Subscribing here on YouTube, that's how we ensure the continued success of this show moving forward. As long as we keep growing, we're gonna keep growing. Nobody will stop. They can't stop us. We don't have a boss.